In the summer of 1941, Germany stood as the master of continental Europe. In less than 2 years, the Wehrmacht had overrun Poland, smashed through the Low Countries, forced France to surrender in just 6 weeks, and driven the British Army back across the Channel. From the Atlantic coast of France to the gates of the Soviet Union, Hitler's empire seemed unstoppable. The German war machine boasted more than 3 million soldiers, over 3,000 tanks, thousands of artillery pieces, and the feared Luftwaffe controlling the skies. To many, it was the most formidable army the world had ever seen, a force of steel and fire. And yet, within just a few years, that same army would be broken, retreating westward in defeat. The question is, how did one catastrophic decision not only halt this unstoppable force, but begin its destruction? The answer lies in Operation Barbarossa, Hitler's grand gamble. Officially launched on June 22, 1941, it was the largest military invasion in history. The plan? A lightning war to crush the Soviet Union in mere months, seize its vast resources, and erase communism from the map. For Hitler, the Soviet Union wasn't just a strategic target, it was an ideological enemy. His worldview saw Slavic peoples as inferior, destined for enslavement or elimination. This wasn't going to be a war of limited objectives. It was going to be a war of annihilation. Germany and the Soviet Union had signed a non-aggression pact just 2 years earlier, splitting Eastern Europe between them. But for Hitler, that was just a temporary convenience. By the summer of 1941, he believed Britain was clinging to the hope that the USSR might join the fight, so he set out to destroy that hope forever. The plan was bold. 3 massive army groups would smash into the Soviet Union across a front over 1,800 miles long. Army Group North would drive through the Baltic states toward Leningrad. Army Group Center would head straight for Moscow. Army Group South would sweep into Ukraine to capture its farmland and resources. German generals expected victory in as little as 10 weeks. Hitler's confidence was absolute. He told his officers, "We have only to kick in the door and the whole rotten structure will come crashing down." At dawn on June 22nd, the German blitzkrieg roared to life. Over 3 million Axis troops crossed the border. The Luftwaffe struck first, destroying over 1,000 Soviet aircraft in a matter of hours, many still on the ground. Panzer divisions punched deep into Soviet territory, encircling entire armies. The victories came fast. In Minsk, Smolensk, and later Kiev, hundreds of thousands of Soviet soldiers were surrounded and captured. In just the first 2 months, the Red Army lost more men than the entire US Army would lose in the whole war. Berlin was euphoric. Propaganda films showed endless columns of prisoners, smashed Soviet tanks, and burning cities. To many Germans, the war already seemed won. But beneath this illusion of invincibility, disaster was quietly taking shape. German intelligence had completely underestimated Soviet strength. They believed the Red Army had around 200 divisions. In reality, the Soviets could field nearly twice that number, and new units were being raised faster than the Germans could destroy them. Entire Soviet factories were dismantled and shipped east, beyond the reach of German bombers, to places like the Urals and Siberia. Within months, these factories were producing tanks, planes, and artillery at a staggering pace. Then came the T-34, a Soviet medium tank with sloped armor and wide tracks that could shrug off most German anti-tank weapons and glide through mud and snow. German commanders were stunned. Here was a machine that outclassed their own in key ways. But the real killer was distance. Every mile gained meant a longer supply line. By autumn, the German front stretched over 1,000 miles from Berlin. Food, ammunition, and fuel had to be trucked or carted over poor roads that turned into dust in summer and mud in autumn. German soldiers often marched for days without hot meals. Ammunition shipments lagged. Fuel shortages forced entire tank units to sit idle. Even medical supplies ran low, with wounded soldiers sometimes left untreated for lack of transport. Then the weather turned. The Rasputitsa, the infamous Russian autumn mud, arrived. Dirt roads dissolved into rivers of sludge. Motorized columns slowed to a crawl, and tanks bogged down axle deep. Horses were brought in to replace stalled trucks. The Wehrmacht, designed for short, sharp campaigns on Western Europe's good roads, now found itself inching forward through swampy morasses, with broken-down vehicles littering the roadside. Even the railways betrayed them. The Soviet Union used a wider track gauge than Europe. Every mile of captured track had to be rebuilt before supplies could roll in. This delay strangled the flow of fuel, food, and ammunition to the front. The further they advanced, the less they could fight. And then came winter, not just any winter, but one of the coldest in living memory. Temperatures plunged to -40°C. Engines froze solid, lubricants thickened into sludge, and weapons jammed. Soldiers without proper winter clothing wrapped themselves in rags, newspapers, even curtains taken from abandoned houses. Frostbite claimed tens of thousands, in many cases costing fingers, toes, or entire limbs. Meanwhile, the Soviets, outfitted in fur-lined coats, boots, and gloves, moved with relative ease across the frozen terrain. They knew how to fight in these conditions. The Germans did not. By December, the lead German units could see the spires of the Kremlin in the distance, but they were exhausted, freezing, and dangerously low on supplies. Then Stalin unleashed his secret weapon, divisions redeployed from Siberia. These men were battle-hardened, well-equipped, and trained for winter warfare. They struck on December 5, 1941, hitting the weakened German lines like a hammer. In some sectors, the German front collapsed entirely. Entire divisions fell back in chaos, abandoning equipment in the snow. The myth of the Wehrmacht's invincibility shattered in the fields outside Moscow. Operation Barbarossa ended in catastrophic failure. By the spring of 1942, the Germans had suffered over 750,000 casualties and lost thousands of tanks, aircraft, and artillery pieces. The Red Army, bloodied but unbroken, still stood between them and victory. It was a turning point. Germany would never again have the strength to win a decisive victory in the East. Barbarossa had bled the Wehrmacht white, setting the stage for Stalingrad, Kursk, and the eventual fall of Berlin. The failure of Operation Barbarossa teaches a timeless military truth. No matter how skilled or brave an army may be, it cannot fight without supplies. Logistics, the unglamorous art of moving food, fuel, and ammunition, is the lifeblood of war. Without it, even the most powerful army will wither and die. But what if Hitler had listened to his generals? What if he had not diverted his tanks south toward Ukraine, but instead thrown everything at Moscow before the winter set in? Could the German army have taken the Soviet capital and knocked the USSR out of the war? Or would they still have faced the same fate in the endless distances and brutal cold of the Russian landscape? History has no clear answer, but the consequences of that summer in 1941 shaped the entire course of the 20th century. If you want to feel smarter about history, make sure to subscribe and hit the bell for more on the critical mistakes that changed the world. Thanks for watching.